The dry spell is about to hit, folks. That's right. After mandatory minicamp, we are gonna be in a drought for 6 weeks until training camp. But before we get there, we still got some things we got to talk about, all right? Mike Tomlin gets an extension for 3 years, stays with the Steelers. Got to talk about that. Got to talk about the Steelers, right? Right? Okay, cool. Amari Cooper, Haason Reddick, and T. Higgins are still holding out. They're still looking for deals. Brandon Ayuk, the debacle continues, unfortunately. When will it ever end? As well as a rant on Aaron Rodgers because he missed minicamp. Minicamp. Come on, guys. And some storylines that we're going to have to keep a close eye on that could, lead into training camp as well. All of this and more on the 11th episode. That's right, the 11th episode of the greatest football podcast you could possibly listen to on a day-to-day basis. Your GM, okay? Your GM who is scouting players 2 years in advance, all right? Who is still not on a team right now. Kale, let's get it. All right, folks. So, unfortunately, yeah, we don't have no bag alerts to talk about. We still got things that need to be discussed, unfortunately. Now, I am going to give you guys a heads up right now. Things may get a little bit scarce for the next 6 weeks, if I'm not mistaken, because basically everybody is, going to be on vacation, on break and whatnot. From the league because there is a gap period between mandatory minicamp and training camp. So we're gonna try to see if we can put out some stuff. If we can't, then we'll probably be on a small hiatus and then pick back up. I don't know yet. I still have to figure things out. But we'll see how things go. But let's dive into the news. Okay. So if you guys have not heard, Steelers head coach Mike Tomlin inked a 3-year extension to stay with them. So let's just address the elephant in the room here, right? So on one hand, yes, this was expected. The Steelers were not going to let Mike Tomlin basically just walk and whatnot. They still believe in Mike Tomlin. However, I think ownership has reached a point where they are tired of not being in the playoffs year after year after year. And I think they do realize that, some necessary changes were made and, needed to be made, whether that be, personnel, whether it be players, whether it be people in the front office, scouting, whatever the case may be. They're just trying to improve their chances of, possibly making a playoff run because let's be real here, folks. The standard for the Pittsburgh Steelers is championships, okay? It's not, just having a winning season. It's not, successfully, being, the number one or the number two spot, in their division. No, it's about holding up the Lombardi trophy. Okay. And, it's been a while since the Steelers have even gotten to the Super Bowl. And, for obvious reasons, things happen and whatnot, changes, players got old and players left and, coaches, didn't stay with the team and whatnot. But the fact of the matter is Mike Tomlin, year in and year out, shows stability, right? And that is something that, a lot of teams, look for in head coaches. You want a head coach who can stabilize the locker room while at the same time keep them motivated and keep them focused on the task at hand and to eliminate the outside noise, right? And so Mike Tomlin, has to be given his flowers because let's be real here, folks. I don't know a whole lot of people that could deal with the antics of Antonio Brown. He did that. He did that for years, right? Until it just reached a point where they just couldn't deal with it anymore. He dealt with that. And so he's dealt with strong personalities. He's dealt with controversy. He's dealt with a plethora of different things, both internally and externally, concerning the team. He's done it with class and professionalism every single time. And, that definitely has to be recognized. However, we do have to be critical of the shortcomings that has happened recently, and a lot of that has to do with his offensive coordinator hirings. Okay, now when you look at the last five head offensive coordinators they've had Bruce Arians, Matt Canada, Todd Haley, Randy Fichtner, and Arthur Smith. Right now, out of those five, right, two of them have been, showed a lot of success, and the offense was, able to put points on the board and eventually, win games and whatnot. Those two offensive coordinators were Bruce Arians and Todd Haley, right? Todd Haley, we all know, Killer Bees and whatnot. Bruce Arians, that's when, you had Prime Hines Ward, you had Antoine Randall, you had this person, that person, blah, blah, blah. So I'm saying all that to say this. The knock on Mike Tomlin has been, him not acing the offensive coordinator hiring since Todd Haley. Let's be real here, folks. Matt Canada was a disaster. Okay, it was a disaster. He kept Matt Canada for too long. He was, trying to see and hope that things would turn around, but honestly speaking here, and I'm gonna try to be as non-biased as possible. When you looked at the offense, that final year of Matt Canada, it wasn't going anywhere. It was stagnant. You were having defensive, players from other teams that were, coming out publicly and saying like, "Hey, listen, we already knew what they were doing. We knew it before we even got into the building. We knew that, okay, that they're going to run here, they're going to run here, they're going to try to pass this, they're going to do this motion, they go give out these call outs, this, that, and the other, blah, blah, blah." They knew those things. And so when there is a lack of not secrecy, but a lack of, anticipation and whatnot, that takes away from the game. And not to mention, that puts a strain on the defense, because guess what? The defense has to exude more energy just to try to, make a play and whatnot. And it showed. But I say all that to say this. This will probably be another episode, completely dedicated to this. Mike Tomlin knows that, he definitely has to show up and he has to break this streak of not being in the playoffs. He has to show it. Okay, because when you have the owner come out publicly and say like he's tired of not being in the playoffs, that sort of lights a fire under, like, hey, like I gotta do more. I gotta make changes if I have to make changes. I gotta do something different just so we can break this streak. Because let's be real here, folks. Mike Tomlin's playoff record is 8-10. 8-10. Okay. Since 2018, the Steelers has only made 3 playoff appearances and haven't made it past the wild card round. I want you to think about that for a second. Now, mind you, a lot of those years, you had the Killer Bees. You still had AB, Le'Veon, Big Ben. You had teams, and it's not like the team was deprived of talent. No, the talent was there. It's just they, for some apparent reason, they just weren't making it to the playoffs. And that, that gets old, time after time after time. Sure, if it happens, once or maybe 2 years in a row, okay, no one's really not going to say anything about it. But if you see that there is starting to be a cycle, a consistent cycle of not making it to the playoffs, people are going to get sick and tired of that. And it shows. This is probably the first time, ever that I've ever heard the owner actually come out publicly and actually say, "Yeah, I'm tired of not being in the playoffs. I'm tired. I don't like that." That says a lot, honestly. But, as always, congratulations to Mike Tomlin. Now, moving on to the receivers. I know we have been talking about receivers basically this entire offseason. Yes, it is starting to get tiring, but it is basically the one position that everyone keeps on talking about, and they have the most news, so gotta cover it. So, Browns receiver Amari Cooper is, not attending minicamp. He is, he wants another deal, as well as pass rusher now for the Jets, former Eagle, Haason Reddick as well. So let's sort of do a deep dive in this. But before we do this, we have to talk about their past contracts in order to reason why they're doing what they're doing, right? So let's start with Amari Cooper, right? So according to Spot Rack, okay, Amari Cooper's last deal was a 5-year, $100 million deal, $10 million signing bonus. He was going to be making $20 million a year. $40 million was guaranteed at signing, and he had $60 million in total guarantees. Now, when you look at Amari Cooper, right? Amari Cooper is in a situation where he's looking for one more score. Okay. Now, will it come from the Browns? I don't know. Simply because they do have a lot of large cap hits that they're not they can't just get rid of, so they may just say, okay, Amari, we'll just let you just play out the rest of your contract here and then let you test free agency. But the thing is, Amari Cooper is still one of the best receivers in the league. Okay, despite what anyone may say, Amari Cooper makes big plays. He makes big plays. When you need him to make a play, he's going to do it. And he shows up game after game. However, the problem is with the explosion of the receiver market just in this offseason alone, how much money is he going to be asking for? Because remember, you still have CeeDee Lamb that's looking for a deal. Jamar Chase is looking for a deal. T. Higgins is looking for a deal. Brandon Ayuk is looking for a deal, right? So you have those 4 receivers that are still looking for top dollar money. And if we're being real here, 2 of those receivers are probably going to get top dollar money. And who are those 2 receivers? Jamar Chase and CeeDee Lamb. Everybody else, I don't know. I really don't know. And I forgot Cortland Sutton as well. He's looking for another payday as well. So there's a lot of receivers that are still looking for paydays. Now, I will say this. The one thing that Amari Cooper does have in his favor is next year's draft class is supposed to be a defensive heavy draft class. It's not going to be the draft class like how it was this year, where it's more offensive driven and this large receiver draft class and whatnot. It's not supposed to be like that, right? So maybe a team in free agency might try to maybe overpay for Amari Cooper. Who knows? But I will say this: Amari Cooper is he deserves to be paid a little bit more. Now the question is, how much more? Because let's be real here. He has more years behind him than he does ahead of him with his playing career. So I don't think a team is going to be willing to be to give him a traditional 4-year deal and whatnot. I don't think they're going to do that. I just don't. But only time will tell. Now, when you look at Haason Reddick's last contract, he signed a 3-year, $45 million deal, 14.2 signing bonus. He would be making $15 million a year, $30 million guaranteed at signing, and $30 million in total guarantees. Now, when you look at his situation, right, in the pass rusher market as a whole, he has been consistent, for the last few years. He's been one of the best pass rushers, not only in the NFC, but in the league as well. Now, the question is, are the Jets going to be willing to pay him, top dollar money? Are they really going to want to do that? I don't know, because remember, they still have Sauce Gardner that they have to pay. And let's be real here, folks. They're going to have to reset the market for Sauce. I don't care what anyone says. The 2 corners right now that are going to reset the market is going to be Sauce. It's going to be PS2. You heard this from me first. Okay? You heard it from me first. Not to mention, there's still a lot of question marks on what's going to happen with the offense. When you have, a large contract like Aaron Rodgers, then, they paid, his buddies, Alan Lazard, Randall Cobb. And then not to mention, you also have to figure out what you're going to do with Garrett Wilson, right? So there's so much money, available that, someone's not going to get paid, right? And so are the Jets going to be, open to being like, okay, maybe we won't give you a traditional four. We'll give you a 2 year, $25 million extension or, something crazy like that. Then it's, oh, okay, cool. But for right now, I don't think the Jets are, willing and open to doing business with Haason Reddick. But, only time will tell, at this point. Now, speaking of, well, actually, you know what? No, we'll continue with the receivers as well because we do need to talk about Brandon Ayuk. So Brandon Ayuk is still not with the team. He is still holding out. Yada yada yada, the same stuff, same old stuff, right? But we got some information, folks, right? So, according to Steelers Now reporter Nick Faribault, shout out to Nick Faribault and shout out to Steelers Now, great guys, great people that report on a lot of things. So Mike Silver, a 49ers insider, reported, right, that basically Brandon Ayuk is looking for a deal that's around $30 million a year, right? Sort of had an idea that that was the case, but here is the kicker in all of this. He is using Amon-Ra St. Brown's deal as a model of what the type of deal that he would want from the 49ers, right? However, the 49ers right now have an offer on the table for Brandon Ayuk that's around the ballpark of around $26 million a year, right? Now the Niners, they may not want to get to 30 million a year, but they are willing to do that if it means, it closes the deal, right? And so when you look at it, right, and I've said this before in multiple, episodes in the past and whatnot, Brandon Ayuk is in a situation where he has, one or two options. He could possibly take a little bit less and, possibly win a championship. And then once he hits free agency, he can really, get the bag that he really wants. Or, he can ask for a trade and, he gets traded to a crappy team and, he gets his money. That's just what it is, right? And granted, I'm not saying that Brandon Ayuk doesn't have to lower himself and whatnot, but what I am saying is this: you're on a team, right? You're on a Super Bowl caliber team right now that has basically sent the message this offseason, this summer, that hey, listen, either you're on this train or you're not. Simple as that. Okay. They were able to work an extension for Christian McCaffrey. They were able to work an extension for Jawan Jennings. They're able to do things. Okay, they can do it with you or they can do it without you. Okay, it's no problem for them. But when you look at the 49ers as a whole, they have a lot of big contracts on their books. And again, I've said this before in the past. You can listen to the previous episodes. When you have Trent Williams, when you have Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, Gravedigger, shout out to Javon Hargrave. When you have all of these big contracts on your books, there's only so much money that you can allocate. And then, not to mention, guess what? You got to find out how you're going to be able to pay Brock Purdy as well. That's not going to be cheap. That's not. So there's so much, that you already have tied up. And then, not to mention, I just forgot George Kittle as well. So you have a lot of high-end, players that got big contracts. And I don't think the 49ers are going to be willing to just continue to run up the number just to possibly get a ring. They're not going to be willing to do that. And I think this $26 million offer is probably like, okay, take it or leave it. If you don't want it, then, you tell us where you want to go and we'll try to see if we can get a deal done so we can ship you over there. That's where it is. And those actions sort of, reinforce themselves with how they did in the draft. Because who did they draft in the first round? A receiver. They drafted Ricky Pearsall. So that right there is sending a message to him and Deebo Samuel like, hey, listen, one of y'all two are probably going to get moved. One of y'all. Now the question is, who is it going to be? Me personally, I think it's going to be Deebo Samuel simply because he already has a pre-existing contract and it's easier to digest. It's easier to break down, restructure, figure things out, maybe add, more money so you can lower the cap hit and whatnot. That's workable, right? Compared to Brandon Ayuk, who basically you're going to have to give a first round pick for. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And you're going to have to pay him top dollar, right? Not a lot of teams are going to be willing to do that. And the teams that are going to be willing to do that are teams that, they're not going anywhere anytime soon. They're going through a rebuild and they're just looking for, a key piece, for their young quarterback or whatever, right? So it's a very tough and very rocky situation. Hopefully things get resolved. Do I think, Brandon Ayuk is going to get paid? No, I just don't. I don't think he's going to get paid. I think the 49ers, I think they realize, like, hey, listen, we got Ricky Pearsall, we got another receiver, we were starting to, rely on Christian McCaffrey to run the ball more. We can still do this thing without a Brandon Ayuk. We can do it. It may be a little bit difficult, but we can do it. So, let's let's see what happens with that. Hopefully, things get resolved and whatnot. But we got some breaking news, folks. That's right, breaking news, fresh from the table, right? So apparently Alvin Kamara is not attending mandatory minicamp because this is contract related. Okay, now when we look at things, right, Alvin Kamara, is definitely a top 5 running back. Simply because of what he does. He can double as a receiving back. He can double as someone, that if you need him to get that first down, he's going to be that person. However, I just think the Saints are not going to be willing to pay him, as much money as he probably wants, if we're being real here. But I think the number one question should probably be, what is his number, and are the Saints going to be willing to pay that? Because let's be real here, folks. The Saints are trying to buy themselves time. Okay, they are trying to delay the inevitable of going through a rebuild, but eventually they're going to have to go through a rebuild. Okay, Alvin Kamara has been their most productive offensive player since they've been there. Okay, now to some people are going to be like, well, what about Michael Thomas? Michael Thomas is not in this conversation anymore. I'm sorry, he is not. He, ever since he's gotten that deal, he has just become a ghost. Okay, his just everything. It just, I don't know what it was, but it just feels like when he signed that deal, it just zapped all of his athleticism and everything that he was able to do before he got the deal. I don't know what it was, but it's just weird. So, this is going to be something that is definitely going to be, leading into training camp. We'll see how far this goes. Hopefully this gets resolved pretty quickly, because if not, that Saints offense is going to struggle. It's going to struggle tremendously because Alvin Kamara does a lot for that offense, right? Now, let's get into this rant, okay? And I'm going to try to be as respectful as I possibly can. So if you guys don't want to listen to this, you can skip a good 5 to 10 minutes, possibly a little bit more than that, okay? So Aaron Rodgers did not report to mandatory minicamp yesterday, right? And so Robert Saleh, put out his statement. He's been in communication with him, and basically, he had a previous engagement and whatnot. So, okay, cool, perfectly fine. But then there were rumors starting to swirl around that basically Aaron Rodgers is not even in the country right now. Aaron Rodgers is on vacation, right? So, I want you to hold that. I want you to put that in your back pocket for a quick second, okay? So, in January of this year, right, Aaron Rodgers put out a quote, and it basically goes like this, right? And I quote, and this is from Mike Florio from Pro Football Network. Shout out to you guys. He said, and I quote, anything that doesn't have anything to do with winning needs to be assessed. He said, so anything in this building that we're doing, and to put yourself in a position to win championships and be competitive, everything that you do matters. And the bullshit that has nothing to do with winning needs to get out of the building so that the focus moving forward. Okay? That's what he said in January. Okay? Now, fast forward to March of this year. He said as well, he said, he made it a point, to basically sort of, call out the locker room filled with anonymous sources of frustration and finger pointing, and basically said, and I quote, to flush the bullshit and focus on winning. Okay, that came from Nick Ferrioff from Sports Illustrated. Shout out to them. Now, let's really assess this thing, right? Since Aaron Rodgers has gotten traded, since Aaron Rodgers have been traded to the Jets, he has shown his ass. Okay, let's just call it for what it is. He has shown his ass. Okay, they've been, as accommodating as they possibly can. They got, some of the players that you've been successful with. They brought them over, no problem. Okay, they brought in, the person that you were comfortable with as the offensive coordinator. Even though me personally, I don't think he's an offensive coordinator. I just think he's a towel boy. But that's another story for another day. They've been very accommodating to Aaron Rodgers. And, for someone who is supposed to be the supposed leader of the team, he is not showing that, okay? He has continued to show that he is still immature at his old age and that he truly is not committed to football, okay? Now, to some people, you're probably thinking, well, what do you know about that? And how in the world can you say that he's not committed to football? Because mandatory minicamp. If you wanted to go out of the country, you should have done that at OTAs, where it wasn't mandatory, where you could miss it and you won't get fined. You could have done that. But instead, you wanted to leave, supposedly, because I don't know if this is true or not. We'll just have to find out. Allegedly, you haven't even reported to mandatory minicamp. You are the only person on this team that has won a Super Bowl. You were the only person. Nobody else on this team has won a Super Bowl except for you. Sure, there's probably players on that team that's won national championships. National championships don't even hold a candle to what it feels like to win a Super Bowl. You've experienced that, Aaron. Nobody else has. And everyone is looking up to you to take them to that place so they can experience that. But you know what? They can't experience that when your ass is not there. Can't. I don't care what anyone says. When you look at any team that has won a Super Bowl, the one thing that they all have similar is they were committed. From OTAs to minicamp to practices outside, of those, those two time periods and whatnot, they were committed. They came in with a mindset that we are going to win a Super Bowl this year. And everyone had to be on the same page. Everyone had to have that same message. And if you weren't on that same boat, you're gone. Okay? That's how the Patriots became the dynasty that they were. Because you know why? Because their leader, Tom Brady, came in with the mindset that we're going to win the Super Bowl. And then guess what? Everyone followed suit. And everyone was committed to this thing. And if you're not committed to it, guess what? You're not going to win a Super Bowl. And right now, it doesn't help that, Robert Saleh in some ways is on the hot seat right now. Because you gave up Zach Wilson to get Aaron Rodgers, and basically it has looked like a complete failure. Okay? Let's just call a spade a spade. It has looked like a complete failure. Aaron Rodgers continues to show that, hey, I am above every person. GM, I'm above him. Head coach, I'm above him. I'm above every single person you could possibly think of. And in some ways, if I'm a player, and because the players probably know what's going on, and they probably won't leak it out and whatnot. But if I'm a player, and if Aaron Rodgers isn't here, I'm going to be pissed off. I'm going to be very pissed off, because you cannot say in January and March of this year that, all the extra bullshit that's not in, that's in this building, that's in the locker room needs to go, but your ass is not here. You need to be here working on the chemistry with your offensive line, working on the chemistry with your offensive players, working on your chemistry with your coaches, all those different things. Because why? You've added new players to the team. So you need to be there and you need to show them the ropes, build that chemistry with them, because there's going to come a time and point in the season where you are going to need them. But you can't do that if you're not there, Aaron. You can't. You just cannot do that. It is unacceptable. And if I am Robert Saleh, if I'm the GM of the Jets and if I'm the owner of the Jets, I am giving Aaron Rodgers a stiff fine because you are the leader. We moved heaven and earth to get you. And so far you have not shown anything for us. It is time for you to grow the fuck up. Grow up. If you are not committed to football, then just retire. But all of this antics and, backbiting and basically being a hypocrite, it doesn't work. Those players are trying to get somewhere. They're trying to experience something that you have already experienced. And they can't do that if your ass is not there. And I'm just going to leave it there because if I don't, I'm going to get more and more pissed off. Now, moving on to the things that I'm looking out for with minicamp that can possibly lead into training camp, right? So these are just, some of the few things that definitely caught my attention. So starting with the Buccaneers and the Tristan Wirfs situation, right? So Tristan Wirfs did report for mandatory minicamp, but I would not be surprised if he's doing his own individual workouts or he's very limited in practices and whatnot, just so he doesn't mess up his value and contract talks. When you look at the Buccaneers, right? The Buccaneers are in a situation where they have arguably the 1B in right tackles, young right tackles, right? It's literally Penei Sewell and then it's Tristan Wirfs, right? For the young for that younger core of tackles, right? And so Tristan Wirfs is probably looking for a deal similar or more to what Penei Sewell just got. Okay? Tristan Wirfs is an elite tackle whether he plays on either the left or the right. That is rare. That is very, very, very rare. And when you have a player like that, you have to make sure that you compensate him. Because I guarantee you, if the Buccaneers let Tristan Wirfs walk, there will be multiple teams who will move off of players, offload contracts, do restructures, ask players to take pay cuts just to pay Tristan Wirfs. Because Tristan Wirfs is a Super Bowl winning champion, and he is diverse enough to play right tackle and left tackle and not miss a step. That is rare, folks. Now, moving on to the next thing that I am, definitely keeping my eye on. Who will the Cowboys pay first, right? Because when we look at it, right, the Cowboys are in a situation where they're either going to pay Dak or they're going to pay CeeDee Lamb. They can't pay both, but they're going to have to pay one of those two. And when you pay the other one's going to walk in free agency. And when that other person walks, who is to say that you will never be able to get them back, right? Because let's be real here. As I've said previously a few minutes ago, everyone has already said that next year's draft class is going to be defensive driven. So you know what that means? That means all of the offensive free agents, that's going to drive up their prices now. Because everybody knows that there's not going to be as many quarterbacks. There's not going to be as many receivers. There's not going to be as many tight ends, running backs. A lot of offensive players that teams are going to be like, oh, we have to go and we have to get them, right? And so, if I'm the Cowboys, I probably would pay CeeDee Lamb. I would. You've already paid Dak. You've paid him multiple times. It's time to let him walk and figure out, what you want to do, because their cap is starting to get out of hand, right? You have a lot of older players who have big contracts and big cap hits, right? And so the best way to combat that is to get a rookie quarterback. Because when you get a rookie quarterback, guess what? You don't have to pay him for 5 years. You don't have to have a conversation with him about money for 5 years. That means you could go through a soft rebuild, and be able to, if you want to draft a certain position, you can draft that certain position. If you want to build the offensive line, you can build the offensive line within those 5 years, and you don't have to worry about the quarterback, right? Compared to if you continue to pay someone like a Dak Prescott, and it basically puts everything that you want to do in a chokehold, right? And so, the Cowboys definitely have a lot of, question marks that they have to figure out, leading into training camp. Because Dak is there. CeeDee Lamb isn't. The question is, who's going to get that bag first, right? And so, the next two, yeah, I'm gonna have to talk about the Steelers because I mean, you just have to. How will the Steelers offense look? Okay, and again, I'm gonna try to be non-biased as possible. When you look at the Steelers offense, the Steelers have experienced a lot of turnaround in just one offseason alone, right? They traded away Kenny Pickett. They let Mason Rudolph walk. They traded away Deontay Johnson. They let go of Matt Canada. They brought in Arthur Smith. They traded for Justin Fields. They signed Russell Wilson to a vet minimum. That's a lot. Then you drafted Roman Wilson. You brought in Van Jefferson, Cordell Patterson, Scotty Miller, Quez Watkins, right? You brought in a lot. So who we there's a lot of question marks on how exactly is this offense going to flow. Are you gonna see a major improvement at week 1, or are you gonna see something where this offense is gonna take them a while to get used to, they regress even more, right? And so, these are definitely major things that need to be talked about because they brought in Arthur Smith. And if you don't know who Arthur Smith is, Arthur Smith's scheme is run heavy, right? And so, it sort of mirrors what Mike Tomlin and the team want to do, which is run the damn football. So, that's definitely something that, people are going to have to keep an eye on. I know for me, definitely going to be watching, trying to see if I can find a feed or something, just so I can keep track of what's going on with that training camp, right? And so finally, the last thing that, and we briefly talked about it, is, what are the Niners going to do with their receivers? Okay. You have one receiver who, sort of went through the same debacle that Brandon Ayuk is going through, basically requesting a trade. I want out. I don't want to be here anymore, blah, blah, blah. And then finally got his deal. Okay, cool. Now you have Brandon Ayuk, who he's looking for more money than what Deebo Samuel was looking for. And so now the question is, who's going to go? Is it going to be Deebo? Is it going to be Brandon Ayuk? As I've said before, and you can scroll back, maybe about 15 or 20 minutes, teams will be more open to trading for Deebo Samuel compared to trading for Brandon Ayuk, simply because you have to pay Brandon Ayuk as well as give up a first round pick and possibly a player to get Brandon Ayuk, right? So these are all, definitely major storylines that I'm definitely keeping track of. And, I know that things are probably going to be a little bit dry for the next 6 weeks, but, hopefully something gets done. Also, I forgot to bring this up as well. I should have put this in my notes, but Kenny Clark, defensive tackle for the Packers, is in contract talks with the Packers as well. So could be a future bag alert coming on. Hopefully we have another bag alert coming on, because we at the Football Junkies podcast love bag alerts. But I'm going to end this podcast right here. Thank you guys so much for listening to another episode of the Football Junkies podcast. If you guys love what you are listening, please give this a 5-star review. Download this, because that allows us to figure out what you guys like to hear, what you guys don't like to hear. And as always, we're able to give you the fix that you need even better, right? Special announcement. We were finally able to upload our previous episodes on our YouTube page. The YouTube page is Football Junkies Pod. Again, that is Football Junkies Pod, okay? Follow us on Instagram at Football_Junkies Pod, okay? That is Football_Junkies Pod. Please like, comment, do interact with it. If you want to say, the Cowboys are the best, let's have a debate. Let's talk about it. All right. We're going to try to see if we can get some special guests in here soon. We're going to try to see if we can also put some of this stuff on TikTok as well. But as always, I hope I gave you guys the fix that you need. Peace and love. If there's anything crazy that's going to happen, I'll put out an emergency episode and, fill you guys in on whatnot. But moving forward, any and all episodes, in the near future will be uploaded same day on the YouTube. And if not, we'll make sure that we communicate that with you guys in a timely manner. But as always, hope I gave you guys the fix that you need for this week. I love you guys. Peace. I'm out.